Okay, part two to my response to the skeptical agnostics 10 questions that Christians cannot answer. And this is still part of discussing the framing issue. So last time we talked about epistemology, the approaches to epistemology, and how that leads to certain questions, how that leads you to evaluate different questions depending on your epistemological framework, and why a Christian wouldn't simply give the walk the other person through exactly why they converted. Usually it's a subjective thing. Most other people are looking for objective proofs, as skeptical agnostic demonstrated in his questions, where he asked several times for objective proofs. This time we're going to be talking about what kind of quest we're on. What a lot of his questions that he poses in his video center around: why is there so much disagreement? Why is there so much uncertainty? Why is there a lack of clarity? And these are his questions, such as which church is the true church, and what he says is more revealing, that so many people disagree. So the problem is the disagreement. The problem is, why is there not consensus? Another one would be, why isn't God more apparent? Another one would be, why are there errors in the biblical text? All of these questions are asked for a particular reason, because he has assumptions. I'm not saying this as like, oh, he has assumptions. Like, we all have assumptions. He's coming from a particular place. Hopefully he's watching this. You're coming from a particular place, skeptical agnostic, and the questions you ask and why they're so important to you come from that place. And that's what I'm going to be talking about here, because it's not necessary to come from that place. So I'm going to just paint with a broad brush, a very inaccurate brush. I'm not trying to point fingers. I'm just going to lay out a stereotype that seems to be at play in framing the skeptical agnostics questions. And the underlying assumption seems to be, well, isn't it true that God wants us to know particular things, as in particular propositional things? And doesn't God just want us to say the right line? I think you can get what I'm pointing at here, but it does seem to be the driving factor behind the questions, because in a lot of, especially American Christianity, this is the tradition that we've inherited. It ties back to the epistemological issue, excuse me, because this is something that was driving Martin Luther. Martin Luther was looking for certainty. He was looking to be assured of his salvation. He was very distraught over the fact that he felt in danger of losing his salvation. And so he framed his whole approach to reading the Bible around finding certainty, finding assurance. And that has set up all of Protestantism after it to have these hallmarks. And down the line, we've inherited this, and we see it, especially in American Christianity, as, oh, I got saved. Not I'm being saved throughout my life, but there was a particular moment in time that I got saved. I know it happened. It's unassailable that it happened. It's done in the past, so it's sealed. And the whole premise for that, I'm not agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. I'm just saying the whole setup for that is searching for that certainty. And that framework allows someone to have that certainty that they're looking for. And when you come through that tradition, I'll say it this way, you get a bad application. I think most people could agree, whether they agree with that application or not, that a bad application of that is to say, well, you just need to say the particular special words of the Bible that make you a Christian and save your soul. The most important thing in your life is to repeat a particular phrase, particular set of words, and that's what we're all aiming at. That's the entire point of our existence. That's what God wants from us. That's what God wants people to elicit out of each other. All that stuff. So if we assume that that's the game we're playing, that that's the quest in front of us, then it does become a really big issue of, well, whose tradition is the most reliable and the most accurate? Because if I follow the right tradition, that seems to be necessary prerequisite to me saying the right line and meaning the right thing. And then, well, how about those errors? Like if the entire point of Christianity is the high fidelity transmission of particular propositions, then it's really important that there is infallible fidelity in that transmission. So that's a particular venue of our tradition that people end up at, and those questions are sort of directed at those assumptions. Not everyone has those assumptions, but that's not going to be my whole argument. Let's broaden it and talk about something more archetypal. So a much broader way of that same question or that same assumption would be, why is there so much disagreement? If there's supposed to be unanimity, if there's supposed to be certainty, if it's supposed to be this particular thing we're doing, why hasn't God made it accomplishable, right? If we make that even broader, I think we're really asking is, isn't life supposed to be an easy quest? Aren't we supposed to be doing something easy and accomplishable, definite, fixed, finite, knowable that you have accomplished it, like evaluatable from that objectivity? Like I can objectively evaluate if you're saved because you've set a certain line, right? But there could be any level of expansion on that. Like, is the quest before us supposed to be easy? And actually, that's not the question. That's an assumption. The quest before us is supposed to be easy. That's what's underlying all of that, I think. And if that's true, then when we look around the world and we're like, it's not so easy, guys, then yeah, that's a big problem. But this is another framing issue. What if you don't believe that the quest is supposed to be easy? What if God set up a hard quest for us? Then difficulty is expected and actually acceptable. And all those questions like, well, there's a bunch of disagreement. Well, there's these epistemological concerns of errors in the text. It's not clear what's an objective miracle. Why is life so dark? All of those things are difficulties. And if we expect that life is supposed to be difficult, then they are difficulties, but they are not unexpected. They are not frame breaking. They are not challenging the basic assumption. So that's a big shift, and it puts all those questions in a very different light and makes them much less of a concern. So I have a video on my channel titled just straightforwardly, Life is Difficult, and that's a big theme in my second book, the book that made me fully Christian. Another video from that book and on the same topic is Game Theory as an Answer to Suffering, which is essentially what I'm talking about right now. We actually don't even play games that aren't difficult. Like, if you just want to say Frogger, like, yes, you don't, it's not graphic, but you're still fighting against death. Like, you're hopping over chasms and you die if you fail. Snake, like, it's basic, but it's highly intense and it gets harder as it goes. Pong, you lose, you miss the mark, right? You sin. All of the games that we enjoy are difficult games, right? Even if I say, like, even if you prefer a particular aesthetic, even if you don't like Skyrim or Doom, like the dark and gritty dungeon crawl stuff, even if you play, what I had like Mario 3D, they tried at one point, like very kid friendly and whatever else, but it's still a difficult game. We play difficult games. We enjoy difficult games. So it's not out of the question that a difficult game can't be a great game. In fact, it seems like from our experience that the difficult games are the greater games. You know, they have to be appropriately balanced and whatnot. But anyhow, so that framing of the question, that approach to it of understanding that life is difficult, understanding that we are given a difficult quest, and that's known and accounted for, and we are appropriately judged based on that, makes the approach to those questions that he posed much different. And it's not surprising then that there is disagreement. And it's, if we're not assuming that the goal of life is to repeat a particular phrase to satisfy other people that were part of the club, it's not really a problem that that God hasn't like made this hyper clear, miraculously just mind-shattering perfection and fidelity of transmission. Again, this question of, well, why did God allow for error in the biblical transmission? Well, because that's how he does everything. He created the world for us to live in as humans, as fallible humans, and he invites us to be part of his creation and to participate in the creation of his creation, even though we are imperfect. So, like that's just what he does. The idea that in order for us to believe in him, he should have done something else is, I mean, maybe I won't go that far, but it's kind of like saying why involve humans at all, or say why don't you transform humans into something they're not, which is another one of his questions. Why not make a perfect creation instead of this fallen one? Those are legitimate questions, but again, depending on the frame that you come at the situation with, those are either super impactful or not. If you assume that life is supposed to be easy and clear and we have this one definite objective and we should know when we've completed it, etc., then you run into a lot of problems, because that doesn't seem to be how life is set up. But if life is difficult, if life is set up so that you have the ability, the propensity to fail, but then come back, and it's more about living through the imperfection, the failure, and returning to communion than it is about perfectly achieving and just being set in stone and done and closed and whatever, then it's a really different evaluation. And so that's also, I would point out, really kind of a Gnostic influence, like the idea that there's a propositional solution to life is the idea that life is solved by the mind. And I think there's a lot of biblical evidence that just throws all that out the water, like that you're supposed to actually live something out and behave in new ways. And St. Paul says, don't find it surprising, the fiery trial that's going to test you. So that's just, as I said, I think most people can agree that characterization made is a bad interpretation of the frame, even if they accept the frame and would argue for it. And all these questions that I've been alluding to, and it really boils down to his question 5, why not make a perfect heaven with beings with free will who didn't sin? Why have the fall? This is really the question of why did God create the way he did? And the answer to that is who knows. God has his knowledge of it, but why would you assume that we could know? Again, that's the framing. Because we come in with this epistemological bent in society in general, even if most people don't study epistemology, we have this, well, how do we know? How are we certain? That's such a big drive. And we want to know why God did what he did. We want to comprehend creation and the meaning behind it. We want our minds to be superior to creation. Yeah, that's the Gnostic thing. That's that pride. But if you have the framework that life is infinite and I am finite, including my mind is finite, it might be more expansive than we think about in the materialist spectrum, but it's still finite. And if it's trying to comprehend the infinite, it's not going to. So while it causes problems trying to understand, okay, how is there this good, perfect God and this fallen creation? Yes, absolutely, that causes problems. But if you believe and if you actually have certainty, as I contended, that's the actually only certainty you can have is the existence of God. If you believe in a perfect God, excuse me, if you believe in a perfect God, well, that kind of sets you up really well to solve all the other problems. Not that you solve them per se, but it sets you up to deal with them and to bear them in hope. Right? So that's kind of the main question. And if you have that answered, just like question 1 doesn't even register, like, no, there's not falsifiable evidence for the non-existence of existence. What would falsify my belief in God? This one too, well, why are things so dark? I don't know, but God's perfect and God's good. That actually is a sufficient answer. It's also a humble answer because in true answer, it recognizes truth. I don't know. But I have hope and faith, right? And I trust in God. And yes, a lot of people who are not Christians and don't have that frame of faith look at that and go, oh my gosh, but what about all these things? Well, if life is infinite, there's no way for you to judge the infinite. You could never have enough evidence to make a judgment against the infinite. You would need infinite evidence. You can't comprehend or collect infinite evidence. So you're never going to be in a position to make an objective determination on the goodness of infinite life or the badness of infinite life. So all the quibbles about, and I don't mean to be belittling, like it is unchristian to dismiss the suffering of the world. There is real suffering in the world. Jesus really suffered on the cross. That is true. At the same time, the God of infinite goodness and glory is infinitely good, and there's infinite glory, and he can make up for it's not the right way. Again, it's not even told clearly in the Bible what's going to happen. It's just told we are going to be renewed, we are going to be redeemed, we are going to be transformed. And what that is, we have no way of knowing. But if we know that there's an infinite God, then he certainly possesses the ability to do that, even if I can't imagine it. So anyhow, I know, back to question 9, I know a lot of people are going to not accept that and not find it super convincing. Doesn't change the fact that it's true and a coherent argument from the framework of a Christian. And so there's background issues to argue about on that. But if we're at an impasse there, well, that's why we don't lead off with the stuff that convinces us subjectively, let's say. So, lastly, I'll just tie that into a video I made called The Purpose of the Bible, which would give my take on what the purpose of the Bible is, which is something other than perfectly crystalline fidelity in transmission of particular propositions. So check that out if you like. Give a like, comment here, share, subscribe for more, and I'll be doing part 3 of this address where I actually get to answering the questions. These parts have both been framing issues to set up those answers as I go through. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.